First attempt at the grandfather's flute. Please forgive the background. The story comes from Mexico. A long time ago, there was a little girl who lived with her grandfather. The grandfather used to take her out on his back, lay her out underneath a tree when he was working, and feed her at lunchtime when he had his own food, and then take her back home, lay her in her cot, and play a flute to her, so that she fell asleep to the sound of this music, which she loved. And this went on for years and years. And of course, over time, the girl grew, became a woman. Still worked with her grandfather out in the fields, but every evening a flute was played, and she slowly fell asleep to the sound of this flute. After some time, the girl had to look after her grandfather, feed him, bring his coffee in the morning, and he would watch her as she alone worked in the fields. But when she came home in the evenings and had her food and took to her bed, she could hear flute music playing in the background, and this always put her to sleep. She was happy, content. And then one day, the grandfather died. The elders of the village came and helped what was now a young woman to prepare her grandfather, to clean him, to dress him. And the young woman's job was to bring a few possessions together for him to take with him to the other world. She gathered some coffee, other precious things that brought his memory back. She took some tobacco and blew it over the things, including the flute. And then the body was taken out of the village into the desert with the prickly pears. The elders and all the village gathered. And as the wise woman came to the centre, she put back her head and cried out, a great sound of calling for the little vulture to come and take grandfather up to the other world. And just as she did so, the girl came forward and put packages on his chest to help him in his journey to the other world. And she too looked upwards, and there it was. Zabalota. The little vulture, the black vulture, came circling down and down and down and down, and stood beside her grandfather. I will take him to great gates of dawn, said Zabalota. Leave him with me. And the villagers said their last goodbyes, and the bird began to rise. And everyone watched, deep in thought. No, and the bird stood by the body, and the villagers departed back to their homes. And when they got home, the woman looked down on the table, and there was the father's flute. He hasn't got his flute, she said. He doesn't need his flute now. He's sure to have gone, said her neighbours. But he needs his flute. He played his flute every day of his life. It was his soul. It was him. He needs his flute, said the girl. I must take it to him. I must take it to him. And picking up the flute, she ran out into the desert on her own. But when she got to where her grandfather's body had been laid, it was gone. Zapalotta had taken it already. He can't live with without his flute. He can't live without his flute. And she put back her head and cried out. The great call to Zapalotta, which she'd heard the elder woman do. And the sound echoed around and around and around. Up, 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 up. And Zapalotta appeared and flew down. I have come for the dead. Are you dead? No, 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 said the young woman. But I haven't my grandfather's flute. He must have it. He must have it. I cannot take you there. I cannot take you unless you are dead, said Zapalotta. But I must take him. I must go with you to the other world so he may have this flute. What can I do? What can I do for you? I could teach you how to play the flute. I could teach you, Zapalotta, how to play the flute. Said Zapalotta, that is interesting. Come with me now. We will go to the great gates of dawn, and I will ask the great vulture who holds open the great dawn what he thinks. And they flew up and up and up to the other world, and there they landed. And the great vulture looked down. You are not dead. What business have you being here? And the little vulture stepped forward and said, I know she's not dead, but she wants to come into our world. And in order to do that, she was going to teach us how to play the flute. Oh, said the great vulture, I would like to know how to play the flute. Show us how you will play the flute. And sitting just inside the great gates of dawn, the two birds prepared themselves to hear how they were to play the little flute that the girl had brought. Proceed. Proceed. The girl put the flute to her lips and thought of all the years she'd heard her grandfather play, and all the sounds that sent her off to sleep. And she thought, it can't be too hard to do this. But the truth was, she had never played the flute. And knowing this, she placed it to her lips and blew across the top of it, and a whistly, whiny sound came out, and it was awful. She couldn't play it at all. The door slammed shut behind them as the two vultures said, You will stay here forever. And the girl looked round and saw that indeed the gates of dawn had closed, and she was forever now in the other world. She looked down, and the only thing she had in her hand was the flute. I'll go and find grandfather. He'll know what to do. So she set out, walking the other world. She walked for many weeks. She walked for many months. And then, sitting under a tree, she saw an old man and recognized him immediately. It was her grandfather. Her grandfather looked up and said, Why are you here, granddaughter? Why are you here? Have you died? You had such a good life ahead of you. Why are you? And the little woman told him everything. How she was now trapped in the other world. We cannot have this, said the grandfather. Give me the flute. And she took the flute. He took the flute and he started to play. The most beautiful sounds started echoing around the other world. And as they did so, other musicians joined him and played other instruments, and the sound grew louder, louder. And down on earth, people started hearing this music and remembering the people that had gone before them, who had died. And they started gathering in the graveyards, bringing little mementos of those people, tobacco, coffee, a photograph. And the music grew louder and louder and louder until eventually the gates of dawn blew open with a sound. And as he did so, all the spirits in the other world became birds, including the grandfather. And the girl grabbed hold of the grandfather and got on his back, because you see they were flying out into the world. And the spirits would have been lost in the world if it had not been for their families and friends gathering and thinking about them and lighting candles, and they all descended towards these various places where their families and friends were carrying memories of them. And the grandfather came down to earth as a bird, and his granddaughter got off his back. And they shared some bread, they shared some stories of their life together. And as the dawn broke, the spirits flew up again, including the grandfather, and went back into the other world, and the doors closed. And to this day, people gather on a Saturday or a Sunday near the 31st of October for the Day of the Dead, where they bring photographs and mementos, and they talk about the people that have gone before them, hearing the music from the other place and rejoicing in those memories.